Okay, well, officially good morning, everyone, and welcome. You're in the very first session of the Summer Symposium for 2025. My name is Chris Sarski. I am one of the designers of professional learning. That's just a fancy name for saying I help with PD. And my role is to work in the math, the science, um, do some work with Indigenous culture and assessment. So those are kind of the big hats that I wear right now. And I've had the pleasure of working with a wonderful colleague, Ted Zeroni, in unpacking the science since it started in its draft form. So some of you may or may not have seen some of the videos that we've done. I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. But we've had a chance to really sort of morph and grow through this process together. And he has a number of sessions that he's going to do, and I'm trying to stay away with anything he's going to talk about. So if you're in his sessions today, then you'll have something new that you're going to walk away from there as well. So what we're going to do today is we're going to unpack what I kind of called cultivating an ecological classroom. I just looked at it from the perspective of in ecology, we talk about things interacting with one another. And so that's really what a classroom does in a very, very good way. Um, and we might be entering this at a different point. Some of you who've signed on this morning might be very new to the science. This is the first time you've had to teach it. For some of you, you've already had a couple of rounds of it, and now you're looking for some new ideas. But also, just how does it look and sound different from what we've done in the past? And that is a distinct difference for sure. So those are the kinds of things we're going to unpack, and I'll talk about the agenda a little bit more specifically as we go along. I am going to begin with our land acknowledgement this morning. And for any of you who have done sessions with me before, you will know that when we come to the land acknowledgement, regardless of what the session is I'm doing, I tend to also embed some things into that slide that relate to what we're doing in math or science or assessment or whatever. And it's also an area that I'm well aware of that people are still really grasping and searching for materials that they could use. So I also am well aware that the APLC that I work with has its own land acknowledgement. And I'm guessing, and I could be completely wrong here, I'm guessing that you're going to hear it a few times today because if everyone's going to use that one. So I didn't use that one since we're the opening one. I thought I'll just start with something a little bit different so that in the event you do have to get the land acknowledgement and it's not the same one every time. So before I go through and read that, I'm going to share with you, it's a very short video, very, very appropriate for children. And what it focuses on, it's called the Honorable Harvest, good time of the year for it. But really what Robin talks about is what is the connection, and for Indigenous, the connection between Mother Earth and everything that happens around is absolutely important. There's nothing more important than that. And so in here, she's talking a little bit, and if you listen, it's kind of done, starts off globally, but then it'll come back to an Alberta setting. You'll see pictures in Alberta. It's really talking about what is that connection in science that we make, and what kinds of things would we talk about with students? So when we are teaching, are we just taking those teachable moments to really say, hey, look around you? And do you have the right to take some of this? And if you do, why are you taking it? So I'd like you to listen to it from that perspective and just sit back and relax. I mean, she's got a beautiful storytelling voice. And we'll just watch that one and then I'll come back again.
If I could choose just a single element of the traditional teachings that we're called to pick up, it would be the teachings of the honorable harvest, which were taught us by the plants, who give us everything that we need. It's a covenant of reciprocity between humans and the living world, a very sophisticated ethical protocol. One of the first steps of the honorable harvest is to understand that the lives that we are taking are the lives of generous beings, of sovereign beings. And in order to accept their gift, we owe them at least our attention. To care for them, we must know what they need. And at the very minimum, We should know their names. And yet, the average American can name over 100 corporate logos and 10 plants. Is it a surprise that we have accepted a political system that grants personhood to corporations and no status at all for wild rice and redwoods? The protocols for the honorable harvest are not really written down, but if they were, it would look something like this. When you get to the woods, you don't just start grabbing everything in sight. We're taught never to take the first plant that you see, and that means you'll never take the last. This is a prescription with inherent conservation value. And then if we encounter another plant, we ask permission. I've always been taught to address that plant, to introduce myself, and tell it what it is that I have come for. If you're going to take a life, you have to be personally accountable for it. I know there are places where if you talk to a plant, they think you are crazy, but in our way, it's just good manners. If you're going to ask, you have to listen for the answer. You can listen in different ways, pragmatically, intuitively. Look around, see whether those plants have enough to share. And if the answer is no, you go home. For we remember that they don't belong to us. And taking without permission is also known as stealing. And the Honorable Harvest counsels that we also take in such a way that does the least harm and in a way that benefits the growth of the plant. Use everything that you take. It's disrespectful of the life that's given to waste it. The next tenet of the Honorable Harvest is to share it with others, human and non. The earth has shared generously with us, so we have to model that behavior in return. And a culture of sharing, we know, is a culture of resilience. Plant gatherers often leave a spiritual gift behind, but it can also be a material gift. Weeding, caretaking, spreading seeds, helping those plants to flourish. We give songs, we give ceremony, we give our respect, we give fertilizer. Every breath that you take is a breath that was made for you by plants. And the water that you drink, whether you're in an urban setting, whether you're on a remote mountaintop, we still are recipients of those gifts. And if we take the time to be grateful, that brings us into that state of humility, of understanding that we are not at the top of a biological hierarchy, that in fact we are the younger brothers of creation.
Okay, and I apologize if that was a bit quiet. I suspect it was. I just did not want to interrupt the video, but you do have access to it. It is hyperlinked within your setting as well. So I just want to make sure that that was available to you. Whoops.
If I could
Yeah. So let's begin then. In the spirit of reconciliation, we want to acknowledge that today's gathering is taking place on traditional lands across the province of Alberta, home to many diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. We acknowledge that this land is a traditional meeting ground, giving voice to its original peoples and the story of creation of this country in a way that history may have forgotten. And so what I would like to do is divert ever so much from where we're going to go with our slide deck and just finish on this particular slide with what I put on here for you, because I have learned over time that not a lot of people are aware that this has already been created. So I'm going to click this on. I will also put the link into the chat box. So if it's difficult for you to see on a small screen, please grab it and open it up and just sort of flip back and forth, or just listen to where I'm at and you can follow along. So let me just get that into the chat box for you. Okay, so I'll give you just a moment to grab that out of the chat box. And if any time you can't hear or see me, please just unmute yourself and say, Chris, I can't see it, or I can't hear it, or whatever. Just don't hesitate to jump in. So the reason I'm sharing this with you is when I'm talking about, even when we're doing a walkthrough, one of the components of any of our curriculums, regardless of whether it was science, any of them, all have Indigenous connections to them. And sometimes we're hearing, I don't even know where to look for some things for this. There are lots of places that you're going to get shared materials today as you go through different sessions. But this is one key place that you may wish to go. And I'm not going to go through the whole website. I'll leave that to you for later. But what I do want to point out to you is that this toolbar that's at the very, very top is kind of where you're going to spend your time grabbing materials, and likely the last one will be the one that you do the most. But all of these are done and they are authentic. And so if I need the story of sky science, I might want to see if there's an elder's voice recording in here, or is there a story in legend that's already been recorded for me. I may not be able to get an elder into my classroom every time to talk about that, but I might be able to just leverage the elder that's already told the story on here and use that. So trying to make it as user-friendly and easy for all of you to grab as possible. But the one that you spend the most time with, of course, will be at the very end. So depending on which grade you're in, you can click it on. I'm just going to randomly pick a grade. I'll just go to grade 3 for now. This is what will come up by each of your grades. And first of all, I want you to not get caught off guard by the coloring. If you were doing math, most people went to this one, but these are used as the colors of the seasons. And so although the curriculum document is the same, the coloring at the top of your document may be a little bit different. So you can see how science is yellow. So any one of these, and even the pilot social studies is in here as well. Like they kept up with the curriculum changes as they've occurred. But when I go through and I have a look at this, again, not going to unpack the whole thing because there's so much information in here. You will basically start with and see that each of the sheets has a similar setup. You have your knowledge, understanding, skill, and procedure for each one, and they use the numbered outcomes that we have posted for science and math. And then you have these two columns, and these two columns are information that fits, according to Elder Jason, fits to what's happening in that knowledge, understanding, skill, and procedure. And so I will very honestly say to you that there are lots and lots and lots of places in your curriculums right now that should have infusion of Indigenous culture, but it isn't explicitly stated. And so we're saying as habit, when you're doing a lesson plan, why not go here every time as well and see if there's something that's sitting beside there, then put it in. I don't need a curriculum statement to explicitly state that you will integrate. Do it, put it in there and make those kind of fluid connections for the students. If you have one and there's nothing here, it's not because they didn't do it, it's because there was nothing authentic that fit. And so really we're just saying anything we put in there was contrived and that's not what we wanted. So this is how you can use that site, especially if you haven't been familiar with it. You might want to spend just a little bit of time having a look at that today. Okay, so let's go back to our slide deck. What I really want to do today is talk about what does a walkthrough look like? And from a teacher side of this, look at it as if someone was coming into my class, what would they see? What would they hear? If I'm planning and I'm talking to the students, kind of using this as a mental checklist, am I imparting this kind of information to my students? If I'm an administrator, especially if I'm a new administrator or an administrator that's maybe not so familiar with the science curriculum, what am I even looking for? What am I listening for? How does it look different? So I do lots of classroom visits right now, and it's more shoulder to shoulder work that I do with the teacher. But really, that's what we're looking at is how are we unpacking this? Is it a stand up and delivery? And this curriculum is not a stand up and delivery curriculum by any stretch of the imagination. So how do I transition from that, if that's what I'm used to doing from some of the other things, to more of an open platform? And if this is your first time through this, that's not going to happen all in 1 year, right? You're going to do better, you're going to get better at as the year goes on, but you're also going to do smaller chunks that some of it you're going to feel more comfortable with and some of it you're not. Because some of these are areas that you have an interest in and some of them are, I don't know anything about that. So you're just learning with the students and that's okay. So we're going to just look for or listen to, sorry, we're going to look at the listen fors and look fors that I might look for if I was in a classroom. How do I know that high level teaching is happening? How do I even know the kids are learning something? What would you be listening for in your class as a teacher? What would you be listening for as an administrator going for a walkthrough to know that the kids are actually progressing through and learning what it is that we wanted them to learn? The learning progressions. I'm going to unpack a little of that today. A lot of this will actually happen in the next session that Ted and I are going to do when we unpack the CPAR document. So again, I don't want to get into too much and divert from where we want to go here. And then kind of just reimagine what a dynamic classroom would look like. I know that the lack of resources has been a number one key issue all along. And I think we have now, over the 4 years that we've been doing that, got a lot of resources for you between New Learn Alberta and between what we offer you in the CPAR documents and what we offer you in PDs, what we offer you in the videos that we did. There's a lot of information in there. In fact, more than you could ever dream of using. So it's really, how does that fit with my style of teaching? And how will I leverage that to use it more effectively for whatever I'm going to do with the students? So let's just do a quick step backwards. This was the science curriculum in the past. And the reason I want to come back to this, because we're not new to the new science curriculum, but I want to come back to this because this approach and where you are now are very different. These were what I called science in a box. If I, as a principal, was looking for extra time for a student who was in my school, needed more time in math and science, and I pulled them out of science. And I said, hey, they need some LA time, they need some math time, they need one-on-one time with somebody for support. If I pulled them out of science, it wasn't a do or die scenario that this child wasn't going to make it in that grade because there was nothing in grade 1 that connected directly to grade 2. There was nothing in grade 2 that really connected directly to grade 3. They were individual units, and quite literally, you could teach them, put them back in your box on the shelf, and move on to something else. And in the time that we developed them, that worked well. And I'm not saying that the kids didn't learn. They had lots of engaging things that they did, but there was no connection there. If I were to ask a student in grade 8, what did you do in grade 2 that feeds to what you're doing right now? You'd probably get a deer in headlights look saying, I have no idea. And I can say to you that a lot of teachers wouldn't know either. And that became very apparent when we first started the science curriculum, where I had a teacher who said, uh, I teach grade 2. I have never looked at grade 4 or 5. How would I even know what they teach? My world has been grade 2, and that's a legitimate comment. Why would they? So this is where you're coming from. This was very much a package, but you're not in a package anymore. You are now in outcomes that not only do they have the same names, which you didn't have here, they're all interconnected. So every grade has these no more long topics. They have these organizing ideas. And those organizing ideas are feeding through from one grade to another grade. So they're not disconnected from one another. And what I teach in matter very much is going to impact what I can have in earth systems. That doesn't mean I have to do something in a certain order, but I can tell you that there are concepts that live in matter that I can leverage and pick up right away and say to the kids, when we were doing this in matter, let's go back and talk about this because now we're going to apply it to earth systems. So that connection and the relatability between these particular organizing ideas is absolutely imperative. You cannot approach this as I'm going to go to teacher pay teacher, grab a matter unit, take that beautiful unit that they've created, which tends to be quite surface level, have them fill in a bunch of paper, and then it's done, and pack it back on the shelf. And now we're moving on to energy or systems. They're all connected. So how does that package that you just did, how do the kids see? How did I make intentional steps to put those and connect them to the other ones? So this is a huge difference in what we've ever had in science. We've never had to worry about, did they learn in living systems grade 3, the groundwork that I'm going to assume they know coming through my door in grade 4, because I don't have time to reteach it all. So this is a very different approach to science, and it's one in which we have to consider, how do I really want to kind of connect those pieces? So why talk about a walkthrough? As I mentioned at the beginning when we were just chatting, walkthroughs are a part of everyday teaching. As a teacher, I had administrators come in and out of my class all the time. It wasn't for evaluation, certainly for evaluation, they're there as well, but just so that they're another set of eyes coming in and listening and watching and giving me some feedback saying, hey, that was really interesting today. Or I was just noticing that somebody over here was just totally lost in this. Like, is this sort of typical for them? Or they're picking up sometimes on things that I didn't even see. So it's nice to have that walkthrough. From an admin side, I would often go into the classrooms because yes, I want to know, how's our science curriculum doing? Are we just doing worksheets? Hope not, but are we? Um, are we just talking about language, giving them definitions, but we're not making connections? And for me as an administrator, when parents would come in and say, I would like to talk to you about this, at least when I'm in the classroom and I see how everybody's laid it out, and every teacher is unique and going to do it differently, then of course I can say, I've been in that classroom and I see how it's set up and I see really good things happening here. So it's a win-win. It's not about doing something right or wrong. It's a win-win relationship that we're building. And that's imperative. And as a principal, I also felt that for me to get to back in shoulder to shoulder with the kids was absolutely imperative, and just see how they're reacting to some of these too. So who benefits? This walkthrough isn't just about one side, it's a global. The kids benefit too. The kids should see people come in and out of their classroom, especially administrators, and not think twice of it. Everything shouldn't just stop and just say, oh, Mrs. Z is here, we should stop talking. Absolutely not. Like, everything should just move on. And that is a testament of, if you're in there a lot and been around a lot. So the things that I've done in this slide deck is just compilations of a variety of different resources, but really just kind of culling them down and just kind of picking the best of the types of things just to summarize in the short time that we have together. So really those primary benefits is the building of relationships. Me with my administrator with me, with my kids, like all of that's really important. Having some expectations. And when I would do walkthroughs in every school that I was a principal at, I always ask the teachers, if I'm going to do walkthroughs in your classroom, what do you want from me? And surprisingly, it's not evaluative, but surprisingly, they always said some kind of note, like, what did you see, or what did you like, or something. And so I would always develop whatever that note was going to look like with them so that it was getting them what they wanted. And it also had something that I would be looking for, and I would just jot down. Saying just good job doesn't tell me anything, doesn't give me feedback. I need something that's a little bit more specific than that. And I also asked them what they wanted it to look like. Is it on a piece of paper? Do they want me to send them an email? Like, what did they want? One of the most ingenious groups that I worked with, the teacher said, can you just get a little duplicate, 2-page duplicate, where you write on the top, it's a carbon copy on the bottom. You rip it off, you get a copy, we get a copy. So if there's a question, we could talk about it. Thought, brilliant. Yeah, so we did that. Um, the goal in a walkthrough, you're there just to watch and listen and to enjoy and to get involved as well, especially when there's labs. If they need an extra hand, I loved being in there and just giving them a hand, doing, a group, taking a group on my own, whatever way I can help is another way that I can do a walkthrough and see how things are happening. As often as you can. And I know that this is what I put research on there. Those of you who are administrators get it. 3 classroom visits a day was always my perfect world, but that just doesn't always work when the office doesn't want to work the same schedule that you do. Things go wrong or things come up and you just can't make that. So between my admin team and myself, we tried to hit those 3 classrooms a day. So it's in and out, and lots of in and out. And if I'm doing that frequently, of course, the students are used to seeing you come in and out and in, and it's not a big deal. There's no disruption, right? So those are important pieces that we want to look at. And again, what's the focus? I had often had teachers just stop by my office, poke their head in, and say, "Hey, I'm doing this today. If you've got time to pop in, would love it. Come on over." So it's just, again, what do you want me to see? I'm going to be seeing a lab. I'm going to be seeing what the kids were working on as a project or whatever. So again, that's part of the relationship that you're going to build. And you've got to trust when you ask your administrator to come in that that's part of it. They're just coming in to see because you invited them in, not just because it was on their list of 3 days or three classrooms a day. And then the last one is a really important one is where are the students in their phases of learning and their progression of learning? I will unpack that language just a little bit more for you. Progression of learning, there's a handout that goes with that, and that's in many of the sessions that you're going to see today. Phases of learning are more about, am I just giving information to the students and they're madly kind of writing down definitions and they're getting the valuable foundational language that they need, but is it just staying there or is it moving beyond that? And that's the critical piece that we really do want to pay attention to. And as an administrator, that is something that I would look for. Where are we at in this? Are we still just doing basic foundational materials? Or have we moved on? Kids are starting to make connections here, and the teacher's asking them questions that is forcing them to make connections. So that's a really important key piece in us moving forward as we go through. For those of you who might be new, I don't want to spend a ton of time on this because if you've been teaching elementary, then you're familiar with this architecture from all of your subjects because the architecture doesn't change, just what's in it obviously does. But your organizing idea is what replaced your topics. So you now have those common organizing ideas, those titles, matter, earth systems, energy, that live throughout the grades. And we have no reason to believe that you're not going to see a good portion of those roll over when the 7, 8, 9 comes out as well. Could there be new ones? Sure, there could be. Um, the guiding question was really designed for you, the teacher. It was designed for you to look at. And when I read that guiding question that's specific to my grade, because every one of them is specific to a grade, it was really, if you unpack that question in your own mind, if you were saying, oh, I could do this, this, and this, that was kind of your sort of skeleton. This is what my unit could look like. So how you answered that question almost gave you the kickstart about, oh, this is how I see it. This is how I'm going to unpack it. In the absence of having a standard resource, which if there's nothing wrong with that, believe me, and it's worked for years. But in science, that standard resource often, especially in the last 10 years, because our curriculum was out of date, really stifled a lot of people. And we've never been required to look at one resource only. So we could have stepped out of the box anyway, but there's a comfort level in looking at a resource that says, start here, go here, go here, go here, go here, and then you're done. Because you kind of know that somebody's done the work to say, this encompasses everything. If I go to teacher pay teacher, I'm not saying that that hasn't been done, but you also have to be cognizant that they may not be Alberta teachers. So have they really unpacked the curriculum in the way that we need it to be unpacked, right? That's another piece that's important to do. So when we're looking at those are the kind of key pieces. The learner outcome is, as it's always been, this is what the kids have to walk away and they've got to be, you're reporting on the learner outcomes. They've got to know this. We have used in all of the documents the numbered outcomes for the learner document. So if you are not familiar with the or the numbered outcomes, it's just really the same document that you pulled off of Alberta Education, only we've numbered the learner outcomes and the cusps that are in there just for expediency for you to grab and have conversations with your colleagues. Instead of trying to say, go down to page whatever and down 5 lines or whatever, you can simply say, let's work on energy 1.1. And so everybody knows what 1.1 is because it's in the document. So again, I'm going to grab the link to this. I'll put it in the chat box for those of you who have not got it. It does appear in other presentations, but just if you haven't got it and you want to bookmark it and use it today, please just grab it from the chat box. Come on, chat box, there we are. Okay, so it is in there. The other piece that's important is that phenomenon-based learning. That would have existed in the last curriculum too, but in this one, even more so. If we're talking about a concept approach, if you're talking about what concepts live and matter that link to Earth systems, I really need to understand what that concept is. In the world of a phenomenon is just an event. So if that event has happened, how does that concept connect to that event? So are the students being exposed to lots of different phenomena that connects that concept to make them understand what it really means and how it approaches. I have to give students examples, but if I only give them 3 examples and we've worked through all 3 examples together, that's a great start. That's kind of that surface level start. But at some point, I've got to be able to say, I'm going to give you some information. It's a phenomenon that happened. How do you see the concepts unfolding in this? And you're doing it, not me. I'm not going to give you the info. You've got to start doing that on your own. And I'm going to give you some feedback along the way. Say, this is a really good start. And maybe you could revisit this and this. I'm not going to tell you what you did wrong or right. I'm just going to say this is an excellent start here and give you some feedback and send you back and try it again. And eventually, if students get into that habit, then we will find that students don't need our feedback anymore because they're getting really good at connecting those concepts to the whatever phenomenon I gave them. So the more you give them, the better. That gives them more opportunities to apply their learning. So that focus is got to be on figuring it out a little bit on their own. And if students believe that all I have to do is wait Mrs. Z out, because eventually she'll just give me the answer, then let them wait you out because you're just going to not give them the answer. We need to have kids get in there. And there's always going to be those students, and I go to classes now where they say, I don't get it. I can't do this. It's too hard. So I'll just come and sit with them and I will just give them some prompting questions. Again, I won't give them an answer. I won't say, I want you to go to this page and look at this, or I want you to look at this diagram and look for only this. I will ask them open-ended questions to guide them. I will say, what do you see in that picture? What do you think that reflects? What do you think that belongs to? And start to get them to start thinking about any picture I pick up. I could be able to do that. And then that three-dimensional learning. This is a critical piece too, right? How do I take those core ideas, those concepts, and how do I connect them throughout the different organizing ideas? So I would be looking for that if I was in a classroom. Are we just teaching matter and at the end of matter, one and done? Or are we hearing things as we go into classrooms and it's not going to be every day? And you might say, well, I do that, but they don't come on that day. And that's absolutely possible. But are you making deliberate connections so kids can see that I learned matter for a reason, and now I can use some of those concepts I learned right here in what I'm doing. Or they should be able to connect them on their own when they start getting good at it. Those cross-cutting concepts, does science only live in science, or does science live in math? Or does science live in social? Or does science live in language arts? Or does science live in all of those? Right? So it isn't because I have 40 minutes a day for science or every whatever second day. It's about where do the kids see those come up? So we often say work smarter, not harder. How could you connect those and maybe have one assessment that is reflected in 3 different subjects? I've got a writing tool that's got to go in here. I've got a piece of communication that's got to come out through my competencies. And I've got to impart some of the things that I've just learned. So how can you structure those so that you don't have to do one in math, one in science, one in LA? Why can't they all be together? And again, as you get more comfortable with a certain curriculum, you're going to feel more comfortable doing that. So that integration, how is it going across those levels? Am I making sure that the connections I have in grade 3 are sound for when they move to grade 4? So it's always well worth your while to know, what grade am I sending them to? What is it that's a foundational piece that they absolutely have to nail with me to be really successful in the next grade? And same thing, I can look back and say, they learned this in the previous grade. I'm assuming they're sound in it. I might need to do a little bit of review, but they've done this. So let's leverage what they've already done and move on. We don't reteach, 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 reteach. So it'll come into this conversation that we talk about, this surface deepen transfer. If you've watched any of the videos that we did right from the get-go, we started off with that concept-based understanding and working through what a surface deepen transfer would look like. And surface deepen transfer is really just three ways of progressing the learning of a student. I have to spend time in foundational pieces. I cannot expect you to understand what density is if I haven't even shown you a definition, how it applies with the definition, like what does it mean, where does it used? I have to give you that foundational knowledge. I can't just assume I'm going to ask you a big question and say it's got density in it and you're going to know what to do. So that surface level teaching is the important piece. But it is sometimes the stumbling block between what should move forward and doesn't. So kids can be exceptionally good at the language. We could give them a fill in the blank, we can give them a matching, we can give them a multiple choice, and they're doing really good at it. But they're all surface level types of questions. They haven't really had to think about all those terms you just taught me in a brand new example that you never showed me before. How do I put all those in there? Where do I see those in that example? That's getting into the deep. And very often, when I worked at Alberta Ed and Assessment, we often would get calls from schools saying, I don't get it. Like we sent an average mark with our students and they were getting 78 right across the board. That was our school average. We wrote the PAT or the DIP or whatever the diploma was, and we're at 59. How's that happening? And sometimes I can honestly say, maybe it was approach, maybe it was resource that wasn't there, maybe it was a bad exam. To have that biggest change would be kind of unusual. But what it often indicated, and a lot of times I would go out to schools and we would sit down, and again, not in a negative way, but just to say, how can we help to see if this is the problem? It was lots of fantastic examples of surface level teaching. But the kids never had to think. Everything was given to them. Everything was, now I want you to fill in. Now I want you to. They never had to think. And a PAT or a diploma asks you to think. They have multi-concepts in them. And we certainly saw that in the math grade 6 recently. So I can't assume that just because I taught you a fantastic job of surface level teaching, that you know how to transfer that. They probably could, but they have to be exposed to those opportunities. So you want to get out of surface and you want to get into deep as quickly as possible without rushing it, right? But I do want to get here. As soon as I give you a new example, maybe the second example, I'm going to unpack it again, but maybe my questions will be more like, if I'm listening to a teacher in a classroom, they might say, so what terms, what concepts that we've already learned do you think fit in this example? And yeah, I'm going to work it through with them. But I'm not already telling them that this one is, this one is, this one is. I'm starting to make them ask their own selves, what do I know about those terms? How do I connect them? That's really the important step about getting moving forward. And the more examples you give me, the better at it I'm going to get. And eventually, I'm not going to need you anymore to tell me, oh, you did a good job on this, you need to go back to that. You've got it. And that comes from practice for the kids as well as for us. So transfer is really, this is the mark. This is just a new example, another example, nothing wild and wonderful, not 35-page question exam. It's just, it could be one question. I'm going to give you a new example and I want you to unpack it like you did over here in deep, but this time I'm not giving you any feedback, right? I'm marking this one. So I can see that development happening. So when I'm in a classroom, I listen for that. If I've gone in at the beginning of a unit, when I come in, let's say 4 days later, I am expecting to hear things that are living in the world of deep. I'm seeing kids already unpacking, maybe with a partner, a problem that they have to work through or a lab that they're doing, but it's connecting the foundational stuff. So that's an important step for us to keep in the back of our mind as we move forward. And so those look fors that I've kind of been talking about up until now are kind of summarized into 3 different places here, and you can click these on later. I'm not going to do that now, but I will just quickly talk about it. So where are the phenomena? Where are the examples of this happening? Where is the aurora borealis? How does that fit? How does it even happen? That happens in a lot of different discussions in grade 4, but even more so when we get to energy in grade 5. How does that happen? So can they explain it as a phenomenon in grade 4? Can they tell the Indigenous stories? That's grade 4. But now I've got to be able to say, how does the aurora borealis happen when we have the sun that hits the earth? And how does it happen when we have the atmosphere? Like, what are all the things that are happening? That's connecting the dots as we start moving forward in the grades. We want content-rich experiences, lots of different examples. And I will be honest, I know that's hard, especially when I don't have a book and you say, science isn't my first choice. I don't even know where to look. So the CPAR documents that we're going to talk about later in the next session, actually, um, you've got lots of things in the slides that we gave you in the recordings. You've got lots of things that have been shared out by other school boards that I can start to leverage and build a little bank of examples that I can use with the students. You do not have to reinvent the wheel and try and do everything on your own. Most of this is all done for you. It's just finding what you want to fit your particular style. That 3D learning, that's that sort of next generation science, NGSS, they really are a strong US science foundation, but they offer so many things that we can use, and we do use and follow a lot of their formats. So I put in a couple of links in here that might be helpful, such as the 3D model builder. How do I build sort of a scaffolded concept map? Right? Concept maps are amazing. And concept maps are the one thing that we heard from the teachers. I need that one right off the bat. That one helped me. It was my lifesaver to get started. So again, those are in the CPAR documents. STEM, it shouldn't just be a little package that we're unpacking. STEM science really is saying, how do we take these concepts? Where do I see it in science engineering? How do they connect? There are so many different sites that already give you labs that you can do and intentional questions that you can ask students to make those connections. Again, you do not need to do this all by yourself. So as an administrator coming in and looking, that's the kinds of thing I'm looking for too. And sometimes I'm even looking for, is everybody doing the same thing? Because a lot of times my kiddos didn't all come at the same level. So I might have a STEM activity for a group that's going to still meet the outcome, but it's a little bit easier for them. Whereas I've got this whole core over here that they're able to handle the second one. And I've got these high flyers who are forever challenging me with questions. Then I've got one for them too, where they really have to put their thinking caps on and work their way through. So again, those comes with comfort levels and as you start to unpack this more. So those learning progressions that we talked about, surface, deep, and transfer, this is our process that we want to go through. If I teach you today something surface level, before my students leave my class or before you leave my class, I should have asked you at least one deep question. I should have asked you something that allowed you to connect the learning that you have got and move forward with that already. Even though you might not be really good at it because you just learned a whole bunch of things, you should be able to take a shot at it. And I might be able tomorrow to come back and say, what were your answers to that, guys? Let's talk about that and unpack it with them. Okay, 5E models. Many of you, we know that many of the science teachers use a 5E model. I put a link in there. It works well for them. They like it. It's a sound practice to set up labs and even set up your lessons that you're imparting. So again, another one that you can put in there. So this is kind of an information page, but it's kind of what I'm really, those look fors, right? That's what we're looking for in a classroom. This is what I as a teacher should be looking for in myself as I'm unpacking. The listen fors are always interesting as well because you're listening to see lots of things. So let's look on the student side first. Are the kids having meaningful conversation? And that's always, I always chuckle at that. Yeah. Are they actually on topic? I guess is where we want to say. Are they talking about science? Or are they off in la la land talking about what they're going to do after school? And that's going to happen, we know, but that shouldn't be the norm. Are they asking questions? And in those questions, listen for, are they asking you questions that use the vocabulary that you taught them? So in the new math, in the new science, I'm suggesting that if a student asks you in everyday lay language, absolutely accept the question. But before you give them an answer, say, could you rephrase that question for me using some terms that we learned? And just make them think. I learned a term for a reason. So how can I put that into my question, right? So it's just getting them to practice using the language. It's always good to give me language, but if I don't practice using it and use it properly, then I'm not really sure that you actually have got it, right? All I know is you've memorized it, but that doesn't mean you understand it. And then comparing and trying out ideas where they are literally talking to each other. What if we did this? What if we did that? You could do a bridge building with sticks, right? And their bridge fell apart. How could you fix it? What if we did this? That kind of inquiry where they know it's okay, our bridge collapsed, but now I get a second chance to fix it. And what do you think was the problem? And now I'm going to retry it again, right? So that setting up that safe zone for failure is okay. We learn from failure. That's how we move forward. From a teaching side, is the questions that we're asking eliciting those kinds of responses that we're hoping for from the kids. So I can't keep asking questions like, what is? What is? Because what is usually gives me a single answer, right? There's no debate, there's no way to get around that and at different entry points. But if we asked, how does this relate to, or how does this example that I just gave you relate to what we just did? Kids will see that at different entry levels and start giving you answers. So the phrasing of how we do that is really, really important. And later on in the year, I will do another session on DOK levels, in other words, depth of knowledge. There are 4 different ways that we should ask questions. And when I talk about how do we get out of surface, if we live in surface level questions, then you can't expect me as a student to give you a deep answer because I'm not there. I've never been asked it. So, how do I get to that? And what does it look like? What kinds of phrasings might I use? Again, we don't have time to unpack something like that today. But any of this applies to any subject you teach, but we're really just focusing on the science right now. Depth and justification, right? Are you asking me a question and expecting me to go deeper? Or is just a surface level answer all you were asking? And if that's all that we say is okay every time, then I'm only going to give you surface level questions because I know Mrs. Z just says, yep, I just have to give them a definition pretty much and she's happy. If that's not sufficient, then I have to think. So where is the thinking? Where is the kind of questioning that we're asking? That goes back to DOK levels as well. And then scaffolding vocabulary, that goes back to the conversation I just had, is where do the kids use the language and are they using it correctly? It's okay for us to say, great try. I see how you tried to use that word. Might have to think of it in this term, right? So maybe they didn't use it perfectly right, but let's acknowledge the fact that they even tried to use it. And that's an important step for students. How do they relate the concepts? That word relate is in your curriculum in every grade. One of the most powerful skills and verbs you have. It's in math as well. But in science, it is everywhere. Relate. How does this relate to? How does this relate to this? Those are big questions. I can't answer them with just a 1-2 kind of thing. I have to be able to say to you, they relate by this and by this. So direct assessment questions, sure, you're going to ask some of those straight out questions, but that shouldn't be the norm. And the last one is that wait time. When you ask questions, especially some that might be a little bit harder, have the kids been accustomed to just waiting you out? You give them silence and they know that if nobody answers, eventually she's going to just give it to me. So eventually, maybe what we do is we give them another question, a little bit easier, but we say, I'm looking for an answer here. I'm looking for you to come on board with me and give me what you're looking for, or get some kind of response, and then prod them forward. So first thing that I'd like you to throw in the chat box before I give you something else is just, I'm going to give you just 2-minute wait time too and think time. What are in your classrooms, and if you've never taught science before, then think of something that you have taught. What are some words or phrases that you would listen to if you were walking around listening to groups work? What are some phrases and words that you would use or want the kids to use that you would be listening for that gives you an indicator that actually, I think they're getting this. I think they're getting the handle of this. So I'm going to give you just a minute to think about what would be some of those words. Just throw them in the chat box. No right or wrong here. Just what are some language things that you might listen for a student to give you an idea that, hey, I think we're good to go here. Yeah, I love to hear those. Oh, I totally agree. What about? Yeah, that's a big one. What about? Because that means they're connecting something, wondering if it's the same for something else. That's a great one. Let's try. Yep. Oh, I love that. When I visited the beach, I love it. My grandson is like that. Hey, this is like when you showed us this. And he starts making connections to something completely different. That's awesome. That's the kinds of things that help us. So yes, thanks for sharing those, you guys. That's amazing because if we don't even know what we're looking for, then how do we know that they're there, right? We have to think about when somebody says, when you do a lesson plan that you're going to look at this and what's your indicator for assessment, those are some of the things that you should be thinking about. What is going to tell me that we've got it? If I don't even know what that sounds like, then that's a problem because I don't know if I'm ever going to get out of surface then, right? And again, some of that comes from comfort level with a curriculum. And if you haven't taught the curriculum before, that makes it a little bit more difficult. It comes with practice though, right? We all learn as we go. So a principal classroom observation, if I were to take all of the things that we just talked about and try and consolidate it more into a bit of and I don't want to make this a checklist, but it just gives you what are some look fors, listen fors, assessment pieces. I've created a bit of it's called the Principal Classroom Observation Guide for Science. Now, if you're an administrator on with us, you may already have the one that we did for math, and it was beautifully done. So I've done a very similar format. Obviously, the contents are going to be different because they're focused on science. As a teacher, I would take this and I would look at it as, that's a really good point. I need to maybe think about when I'm planning my lesson, how do I unpack some of that? You're not going to do this whole document all in one lesson, right? So you're going to pick and choose how you're going to get it started. Let me just grab the link because I do want you to have just a few minutes before I keep going on what you're seeing here. So I'm going to throw this in the chat box. My chat box is not being very comfortable today. Okay, I'm going to give you a minute to grab that and definitely download it and have it. I'm not saying it's the end all be all, but it is one that we offer administrators that we're suggesting it's a good one to walk through for you just as a guide as well. What are you looking for in these new science programs? Could I take this to any other subject? Sure, I could. I could do it in social studies. I could just framing it a little bit differently. So what I'd like you to do for a moment, okay, I'm just going to give you, we're getting close to our 15-minute mark here. I want to give you at least 3 or 4 minutes just to open it up and scroll through it. Like I want you to look at it, and maybe there's some areas that are of more interest to you, and just to have a look to see what's inside it. All right, so just take that minute before we move forward. And if anybody has any questions, please pop in at any time. Just one more minute. Okay, so this is written for the administrators to look at and consider what might I look for when I'm going into a science classroom. Maybe your administrator doesn't have a science background, right? So it might be just as uncomfortable for them not to really know what they're looking for. But you'll notice that in the right-hand column that the questions are already phrased as well as quite open. So it's an opportunity for me as a teacher to explain, to identify connections. I have to make the connections for the person who's asking the question. This is not about an evaluation. This is just a walkthrough. Legitimate question. I saw, wow, great anchor charts. How are they using those? I should be able to say, or are they just up on the wall for show and tell, but nobody's really actually using them, right? Then what's the purpose of doing them? So obviously you're using them. So the questions that you're seeing in here, if I'm looking at this from a teacher side, I should be able to answer those questions. And also I should have them in order to be able to answer those questions. These are examples of questions. This is not the end all be all, the only questions that I would ask. And I'm a person who loves to just go with the flow. Whatever I see, I'll generate the question just based on whatever I've just walked into. So I'm not reading a script. And each person is different, right? We're going to look at this uniquely differently. But this also, if you're an administrator who hasn't done a lot of these before, there's a little bit of a guide for you as you start stepping through. You'll notice that there are some links in here as well, because these three pieces, those competency, literacy, and numeracy progressions, are absolutely critical to be building in. And they're kind of keep getting left by the wayside. So we want to make sure that we're showing, how am I looking at the competency of communication? Well, if they're doing a presentation, if they're working in groups, collaborating, I mean, you've got that covered. How are they doing critical thinking, right? So where does that sit? And it doesn't have to be a lesson in itself, and it doesn't have to be a big splash, but it should be obvious to the students that we're going to work a little bit on critical thinking today. And what does that look like? We're going to be doing this. Here's my question to you. So critical thinking means you will look at my question and you're going to unpack it. I don't have to tell them that every time, but I do have to teach them. If I've never done it, I have to teach them what it means to be a good critical thinker. So that's an important piece that we have in there. And again, these are just sample questions. They are not the end all be all. The assessment is always a big one, right? Assessment, we still have to mark and we still have to assess, but we don't have to have 25 quizzes. Formative is more important than anything. It's at the end. All I have to do is, did you get the outcome? And can I show that you did? So I could do lots of formative assessment, open-ended question, exit slips, quick question on the board, individually answer it, or as a pair answer it, right? It doesn't always have to be an individual. And I can collect those. I can have single point rubrics where we have the outcome down the center. And I'm, as they're working on a project or as they're working through something, I'm giving them evaluative feedback on that. And some of them will be in the left-hand column where they're not quite there yet. You know, I'm going to give them some comments about, you did a great job of starting on this. I wonder if you could revisit this. Whereas on the other side, they nailed this one over, they nailed it. I'm going to say, this is an excellent job of connecting these two. Don't just say good job, because good job doesn't tell me what I did a good job in. I connected this concept to this thing that happened in our lab or whatever, right? I'm going to be specific. Doesn't have to be big, doesn't have to be a paper. It can be 3 words sometimes. It's just really a matter of making it user-friendly for both you and the student. We want to be asking questions that get that deeper thinking, right? That's a big one because we want to make sure that they're there. So those are big pieces that we want students to have. Some of those questions are still really hard to answer. We need to take time to reflect on those. Yep, you're very correct in that, Vanessa. They do take time, absolutely. And even as an administrator, sometimes if I came in and asked some of these open-ended questions, I totally can tell you that sometimes the teachers looked at me like, whoa, I'm not even sure how I'm going to answer that. And I didn't expect an answer right away. I just said, think about what you did today. Whenever you want to just chat for a minute or throw me an email, whatever. It's hard sometimes to answer those questions, and it is, but those are important questions for us to look at. There are some places that we can help you with some of these, and I did embed just a few things. So I'm going to go in the last 5 minutes we have here, a couple of things I want to do. The one example that you have, it's already hyperlinked in here. This is a CPAR document. Ted and I are going to unpack these right away in the next session. But why I want to show this to you is if you're not going to that, and that's fine, on page 3 of any CPAR document, we have this uh, series of hyperlinks already done for you. These hyperlinks are, how do I ask good questions? And that's teaching the kids how to ask good questions. These are all slide decks that are done for you, where you can help work through with the kids when you're asking a good question or answering a good question. What are some of the things that we look at when we're looking at thinking skills? All of these were created over the time that we were unpacking material with the teachers, and we have them, they're embedded in all of the videos that are on the website, and you have access to them. But what we found was we get email after email after email saying, I really want that. I really want the Freyer model because I really want the kids to think and connect. I can't remember where you put it. So now we've started to put these in every CPAR document. Doesn't mean that you're going to use all of them every time. It's just that it's a one-stop shop, so you don't have to go look for them. There's a ton of info on this page that's already done for you. So what I'm trying to say is leverage the materials that are in front of you as opposed to trying to recreate the wheel. There are things in here when you click them on say, no way, I do not feel comfortable with that. Then don't go there. Just don't use it. But there's lots of things here. If you need a little bit of a nudge yourself, if you're feeling, I would really love to do what Chris is saying, but I don't even know how to do that. There's lots of info in here that will help you get there. You don't change everything overnight. You do little bits at a time, bits and pieces. Take one organizing idea, try something new in it. Try new kinds of questioning in that one. And once you get comfortable with that, add a new level on when you get to the next organizing idea, right? So little bits and pieces. On the right-hand side, these are assessment connections, so single point rubrics. How could I do a compare and contrast with the kids? I love hula hoops. Those of you who've worked with me, I bring hula hoops everywhere I go. Hula hoops are great Venn diagrams. Put them on the floor. Put a topic, put a concept in each one and give me a whole bunch of cards and ask the kids to sort them. What's the common to both those concepts? What's unique to this one and unique to that? Those are deep thinking kinds of questions. And the best part of it is I can go around in a classroom and I can watch this as a visitor. I can watch and I can listen. What are they saying to decide where they're going to put things in those Venn diagram, into those hula hoops? Right? There's my listen fors. Oh yeah, that group has definitely got it. They've got good language. They know what they're sorting. This group is they're kind of guessing here. They're not really sure what they're putting in where. So those kinds of scenarios give me tons of information as a teacher. And the best part of a hula hoop scenario is I could set up 7 of those on the floor in the classroom. I got 7 different stations. They can rotate around, right? Those are the kinds of things that help me listen and know that the kids have moved forward. But it's also fun for them. It isn't a worksheet. You give me a pack of cards and ask me to sort them is way more fun than filling in the lines on a worksheet. And I've still accomplished exactly the same thing. So that's why I included that in there. Those are important kinds of pieces that you want. So I know that sometimes just to say, where do I get all this stuff? A lot of that's been done for you. All right, so while I get your link ready for the slide deck. I wonder if I could ask you to, I'll put this into the chat box. I will put that into the chat box. Let me just jump out of that. Or if you have your phone and you take a screenshot of the QR code, this is a very, very brief survey. If you don't mind just taking a minute to complete that, I will put this in here. Okay, so it's in the chat box now for those who prefer that way. And just let me grab our link in the meantime, and then we'll give you that time to, are there any questions, anything anybody would like to chime in on as well? Oh, come on. All right, your slide deck is in the chat box if you'd like to grab it as well. I'm going to just stop the recording in case some people don't like to ask questions when we're recording.